When the rescue fishermen finally found the body of Jose Correa, a harrowing silence clung to the air. The small wooden boat lay hopelessly trapped in the thick, unforgiving mud of the low tide. The young man, merely 22, was still, his skin unnaturally cold. He bore no visible wounds, no bruises, no marks of violence. Yet beside him, two companions writhed in agony, their bodies covered in deep, unexplained burns. Most chillingly, their heavy work clothes remained perfectly intact, unsinged. There was no sign of a struggle, no debris from an explosion, and not even the faint, acrid scent of smoke. The only sound was the slow, sucking noise of the rising tide creeping around the hull, as if the very sea was breathing in the dark secret of what had transpired there. The date was April 26, 1977. The location, Ilha dos Caranguejos, Crab Island, a forgotten, isolated patch of mangrove and mudflats deep within the vast São Marcos Bay, on the coast of Maranhão, northeast Brazil. In this frontier where civilization yields to the primordial swamp, reality, for four men, seemed to have twisted and broken under an unimaginable pressure. Just hours before, it had been a familiar routine. Four lumbermen had set out from São Luís, sailing toward the remote island to harvest valuable wood. Jose, the youngest, was a last-minute replacement for an ill colleague. With him were the hard-working brothers Apolinario and Firmino Correa, and their cousin, Aureliano Bispo. The crossing was long, taking half a day. The small vessel navigated through tangled roots and turbid, brown waters while the tropical sun beat down relentlessly. Crab Island, desolate and swarming with mosquitoes, was known only to crab hunters and woodcutters. They spent the afternoon felling trees, sawing logs and piling up masts, planning to sleep for a few short hours and depart precisely at midnight, the moment the high tide would grant them safe passage back to the city. But the tide rose and no one stirred. The internal clock of the seafaring men failed them completely. When Apolinario finally forced his eyes open, the tropical sun was already far into the morning sky. An oppressive, heavy silence, a silence that felt somehow electrically charged, lay over the deck. The air smelled of iron mixed with a sharp scent of ozone, the kind that lingers after a massive lightning strike. He heard a low moan from the bow. He raced forward and found his cousin Aureliano collapsed, his skin covered in angry reddish lesions, his clothes completely undamaged. Moments later, he saw Firmino on the other side of the boat, in the exact same horrifying condition, body bloated, eyes semi-closed, barely breathing. Desperate, Apolinario searched for Jose but knew he was too late. Every attempt to rationalize the event collapsed. The only one capable of movement. He was trapped by the receding tide for several more hours in the burning mud. When Apolinario finally managed to drag the boat toward the port and raise the alarm, Jose was dead, Firmino was deep in a coma, and Aureliano was suffering from profound shock. No one could have predicted that this chilling incident was merely the overture to a far deeper, more enduring mystery. Jose's body was rushed to the Forensic Medical Institute. The final report delivered a dubious verdict. Cerebral vascular accident caused by arterial hypertension, a consequence of emotional shock. It was a bureaucratic explanation, designed to close a case that defied every standard of logic. There were no wounds, no contusions, no burns. Jose had simply ceased to exist. The Institute's chief doctor later sharply criticized the rushed finding, confirming that a full autopsy was never performed. Nevertheless, the case was officially closed, with a cause of death that, to many, seemed to conceal more than it revealed. Meanwhile, the two survivors were fighting for their lives at the São Luís Emergency Hospital. Firmino remained comatose, afflicted with severe second-degree burns across his left arm, ribs, and face. The muscles in his hand had begun to stiffen permanently. Aureliano, slightly more lucid, only recalled feeling a fire passing through his, body. He had no memory of seeing lights or physical contact. The only sound imprinted on his memory was the terrifying sound of a metallic vibration in the air, as if the entire physical space around them had been supercharged for one terrifying instant. Apolinario, initially without physical wounds, began to experience persistent tingling, sensations and debilitating headaches days later, symptoms that would plague him for years to come. A silent, internal echo of the ordeal. The civil police opened an inquiry. Investigators found no traces of fire, acid, or chemicals on the boat or clothes. The theories of toxic gas or lightning were dismissed. The supervising delegate, utterly baffled, penned a line in his official report that would immortalize the mystery. The facts transcend normal physical comprehension. It was then that the unofficial, far stranger reports began to emerge. Residents from the nearby river communities stepped forward, reporting having seen multiple luminous spheres, or fireballs, crossing the sky above São Marcos Bay during that same fateful dawn. They moved erratically in a sharp zigzag pattern, lighting up the shallow coastal waters with an intense, unsettling bluish-white glare. Experienced fishermen pointed out that these lights were unlike any known phenomenon. They were slow, deliberate, as if observing. The local press began to cite these aerial phenomena, linking them to a wave of other strange sightings reported across the region since the previous year. The eerie coincidences were rapidly stacking up. When the Brazilian Air Force, FAB, became officially aware of the bizarre incident, the Crab Island case was informally attached to the classified reports of Operação Prato, Operation Plate, a vast secret military investigation into unidentified flying objects that was already deeply entrenched across the Pará and Maranhão states. Although no officer would ever publicly admit the link, documents declassified decades later would confirm that the episode was, in fact, studied under the same secret operational code. From that moment on, the mystery ceased to be merely a local tragedy. It evolved into a persistent, unsettling national enigma. The months following the incident were marked by a suffocating institutional silence. No government authority was willing to publicly discuss the case, and the shell-shocked survivors instinctively avoided all interviews. But as time went by, the São Marcos Bay began to acquire a chilling new reputation. Fishermen, military personnel, and coastal residents began reporting nocturnal lights that would materialize out of thin air and vanish again in absolute silence. Some lights moved slowly over the dense mangrove. Others hovered silently over the sea, and a few were seen deliberately diving into the dark waters as if a massive, unknown organism were breathing beneath the surface. The Maranhão press, seizing the dramatic narrative, began to call the phenomenon the island lights, and no expert could definitively say if they were simple meteors, secretive military drones, or something far beyond human comprehension. In late 1977, a determined journalist managed to track down Aureliano Bispo, the cousin who had survived the burns. He was living in complete isolation, having abandoned his work and still bore the visible, ghastly marks on his arms. When he finally agreed to speak, his voice was barely a haunted whisper. He recounted that his last clear impression was of seeing a silent, white fire descending from the sky. After that, nothing. Time for him had simply been erased. He added that for months he was tormented by dreams of the same metallic sound, a low, grave hum that would materialize from nowhere and make the very air around him intensely vibrate. The recording tape of this testimony allegedly vanished shortly afterward, confiscated by federal agents who visited the newsroom. No official record of this seizure was ever documented, adding a layer of government interference to the strange case. In 1978, the 3 surviving men were subjected to intense sessions of regressive hypnosis, conducted by a parapsychologist, invited by the Federal University of Maranhão. The desperate goal was to recover any fragmented memory of the lost hours. But the results were deeply disconcerting. None of the 3 could successfully recall what occurred between the moment they fell asleep and the instant Apolinario awakened. Crucially, however, all 3 exhibited a dramatic spike in heart rate and severe tremors when the session neared the symbolic time of the pre-dawn incident. The clinical reports describe reactions consistent with severe psychological trauma. For the researcher, the most plausible medical hypothesis was amnesia induced by an extreme, overwhelming event, something so intensely profound that the human brain chose to permanently delete the memory for survival. A disturbing pattern emerged. The FAB had logged dozens of communications regarding luminous foci along the northern coast. Declassified military documents revealed that the name Ilha dos Caranguejos appeared in multiple internal reports as a parallel observation area. The pattern of injuries, burns without fire, lack of combustion odor, paralysis, and accelerated decomposition was frighteningly identical to dozens of other occurrences investigated by the Air Force during that exact period. For skeptics, this was an unfortunate coincidence. For others, it felt like the beginning of something much larger. 9 long years dragged on. The case had transformed into a local legend among the fishermen, but the deep-seated fear never truly dissipated. Most avoided navigating near Crab Island after dark. Then, on April 28, 1986, the impossible tragic scenario repeated itself with horrifying precision. A new group of 4 men arrived on the island with the exact same intention. At dawn, 2 of the men were discovered disoriented, suffering from burns on their backs and arms, their clothing whole. A third man, Sebastian Ferreira, was found dead. His body exhibited the identical, chilling characteristics as Jose Correa's: unnatural rigor mortis, accelerated decomposition, and a total absence of external injuries. The coincidence was a precise, invisible copy. The police returned, accompanied by the Navy. The medical examination again offered no answers. The official case was ultimately filed as undetermined cause, but popular. Fear swelled dramatically. People swore they saw luminous spheres rising from the mangrove on that same night. The incident was now integrated into a wider documented pattern of behavior. Invisible thermal discharges, electrical interference, amnesia, and acceleration of organic decay. For the military, it was a dangerous, high-value observation point. The island was closed under the justification of environmental risk, and no local fisherman would serve as a guide. Decades later, the case remains a labyrinth. For most establishment scientists, the official explanation suggests rare atmospheric discharges, like ball lightning or spontaneous combustion from methane gas emanations. But none of these theories adequately account for the state of the bodies, the complete amnesia, or the pattern of injuries. Science simply could not find firm footing in that shifting mud. Ufological researchers recognized a familiar pattern, symptoms, described in dozens of Operation Prado cases. For them, Crab Island represented a direct point of contact. The island's name, along with its coordinates, appears in declassified FAB files, carrying the chilling annotation: marshy area, high luminosity index, undetermined biological risk, no further explanation accompanies the stark phrase. Just the heavy, ominous stamp, confidential. No Brazilian governmental agency has ever officially recognized the anomalous nature of the case, but the protracted institutional silence speaks a more powerful truth. In the rich, vibrant local folklore of Maranhão, the modern case rapidly fused with ancient tales. The strange lights seen over the bay earned the dark nickname Mães d'Água de Fogo, firewater mothers, luminous spirits that locals believed would punish anyone who dared to invade the island without permission. In São Luís, ferry boat captains reported seeing unearthly flashes over the water on moonless nights. For the elderly, it was simply the Fogo corridor, running fire, a chilling warning from the invisible world. But for the men who were there, it was an unnamed, life-shattering trauma. Gradually, the name of Crab Island faded from the national headlines and reverted to what it had always been: a desolate territory of mud and solitude. But for those who intimately know its history, every single wave that breaks in the São Marcos Bay still carries a faint, metallic echo of what happened in that forgotten pre-dawn hour. Today, more than 4 decades after the first tragedy, Crab Island remains there, hauntingly present, invisible to tourist maps, fiercely protected by treacherous tides and impenetrable hostile vegetation. Viewed from a great height, it appears like a massive dark organism, slowly breathing beneath the water, half land, half absolute silence. Those few who dare to approach report strange, disorienting sensations, magnetic compasses spinning wildly without direction, boat motors failing suddenly, and a profound, physical feeling of being intensely watched. Local fishermen staunchly avoid the region after the sun sets, simply saying that the island does not like company. On the hottest, stillest nights, when the coastal wind vanishes, the same unearthly flashes appear on the distant horizon. White points that hover over the dark sea, move slowly, and then extinguish without a single sound. They are the same lights described by generations of witnesses, repeating the same inexplicable pattern, as if the phenomenon itself is still anchored there, patiently waiting to be noticed and feared once again. For serious scholars of the inexplicable, the case of the Crab Island woodcutters symbolizes the very limit of human understanding, the moment where conventional reality bends and warps before the true unknown. The physical evidence remains frustratingly fragile, but the psychological impact on every person involved is undeniable and permanent. Firmino died decades later, having never fully recovered his health. Aureliano moved far into the interior, refusing to ever speak of the subject again. Apolinario lived out his Final years plagued by chronic pain and episodes of mental confusion until the very end. Not one of them ever truly escaped what happened that night, or the terrifying, silent presence they believed they had seen. The Atlantic Ocean off Maranhão holds its secrets tightly, like ancient, unhealed wounds. Beneath the dark, rippling reflection of the São Marcos Bay, the boat of the four men still seems to be anchored, motionless, a prisoner of time itself. And when the tide rises, there are those who swear they can hear a distant sound, a faint, metallic hum rising from the depths, a chilling reminder that some places, and some events, simply refuse to be forgotten. Crab Island remains there, shrouded in mud, silence, and memory, a dark spot on the map where the sky touched the earth, and humankind never fully understood what it saw.